I'm a native Arizonan, born and raised. I'm from Mesa. I went to Mesa High School. I'm a first-generation college student. My dad was a commercial painter. My mom worked in a factory. And growing up, I did okay and did great in elementary school and junior high, and then I hit high school, and the wheels started to come off for me a little bit. Why? Not because I was a bad kid. I was actually a really good kid. But I realized I was one of those students, and how many educators do we have in the room? Folks who are educators. All right, do you know the student that got an A when they wanted to, and then got a C or a D when they wanted to? I was that kid. I was very much that student because, for me, if you did not convince me it was relevant, I gave you a really hard time. And my high school algebra teacher would probably, I never believed that I teach statistics today, because I argued with him, why do I have to graph a line? Tell me why this is important to me. But remember, my dad was a painter. I had no idea how important that was. So I didn't do particularly well in high school, truth be told. So for me, my path forward was through the military. I joined the Army for a couple of years, on the advice of a counselor who told me I needed to get my butt kicked. We didn't use that word, by the way. And my girlfriend, now wife, who I've known since high school, who told me he was right. And so I decided to join the military. Now, I did much, much better in the Army. I took high school over again, and I went to ASU, and my college GPA was a ton better. Why? Because I learned my lesson in the military. And at the same time, I should tell you, I'll be honest with you, I am a Sun Devil. I am. But my wife, who by the way is much more talented than I am, she got a scholarship, came to U of A. And so we are well represented in our home for sure. And did better, and I went to the University of Chicago, where I have a doctorate and a master's in education policy and research. And at that point, Lori and I had a choice. She went to law school there as well, by the way. She was in law school at the same time Barack Obama was there. So Barack was one of her professors in law school. And so we had a chance to contribute everywhere or come home and build, and we decided to come back. And as David mentioned, since coming back, I've worked at the state legislature. I was director of research and policy. I was associate superintendent for the state of Arizona. But for the last 9 years, I have had the privilege of teaching teachers. I've been a professor at ASU, and many of my students are now education leaders throughout the state, and that has been quite a privilege for me. So I got tenure a couple years ago, which is a huge accomplishment, a huge goal for me, because my goal was to become a professor, and you're not a professor until you get tenure. Truth is, folks, I knew then that as somebody in education policy, it wasn't just enough for me to write. For my colleagues in journals, I needed to go do something and make a difference. And so decided that I was going to do this, to run for superintendent of the state, because as a professor, as somebody who's worked with the legislature for a long time, I was tired of doing research and handing it to people who either didn't care or didn't know what to do with it. And that is a huge motivation of mine. I believe that we are better off as a state if we do pay attention to research and get through and not politics. Also, I'm a parent. I have a 7- and a 4-year-old who are prominently displayed on our materials there, Laura and Olivia. And they are in the Phoenix Elementary School District. And I am committed to them staying in a quality public school, and every other child having that same opportunity as well. My last reason is as a citizen of Arizona. We have a great state, and I don't think you realize that as much until you leave it for a little while and get a chance to look and realize that we've got so many things going for us. We're just fighting over things in this state that with a little perspective don't matter. I firmly believe we could have the most innovative public school system in the country. And we can do that because we have 3 characteristics that most other states would love to have. We're small, we're flexible, and we're a little crazy. And that's just a little. But that's what you need. You need the ability to be small, you need to be flexible, and to take risks. And we've got that in Arizona. But we're just not seeing the things that are our resources, that are positive aspects of our state as resources. And I'll give you one example that I talk about a lot, and that is language. My wife and I had the opportunity to live in Europe for a year where I studied international standards, trying to get an understanding of how do you truly get students ready to be internationally competitive. And what I learned is the very first thing every student did was learn multiple languages. The very first thing. And yet in Arizona, we have the ability, we have language diversity. And yet, rather than embracing it, what do? We try to replace English with Spanish. We tell students, our Spanish-speaking students, that they can't speak Spanish. And folks, our biggest trade partner is just to the south of us, and they speak Spanish. And we should be in a position, economically, educationally, telling the world, if you want a bilingual international workforce, come to Arizona. But in order to do that, we need to look at our language diversity as a resource instead of a problem. And it's those kinds of different perspective that I'm going to bring to the position. The other things that we're going to change, a couple things that are important, is, folks, we are obsessed with standardized testing, not just in this state, but in this country right now. And we are going to end that obsession under my administration. Absolutely. I think you all know that your schools get a letter grade, right?
Yes.
Well, have you seen it? You may not know that 96% of that letter grade is based off the standardized test score. Think about that for a second. 96%. Right? That was fact-checked by the Arizona Republic. And we got 4 stars true. In fact, I remember when Julie called me and said, the Arizona Republic is calling, and I said, Julie, we have this one down to the 10th. I did it myself. Turn it in. It's going to be true. And it was. But what does that mean for our students and our teachers? What it means is that for all intents and purposes, what the state is asking students to do, teachers to teach, is to get students through multiple choice type tests. That's it. Because their evaluation is based off, almost all of it is based off of standardized testing. Right? Folks, there are no multiple choices in life. Nobody hands you 4 choices when you graduate, or when you face something tough and says, here, pick the best one. Right? The more we prepare our students for multiple choice tests, the less prepared they are for life after high school. Right? But the challenge has always been, well, what else do you measure? And what we're going to do is we're going to start measuring what matters in this state. And I'm going to give you some examples. When students leave high schools finishing a rigorous curriculum, by the way, passing a test doesn't get you ready for college, but a rigorous curriculum does. We know exactly what that looks like. 4 years of English, 4 years of math, science, foreign language, arts. When schools get students through a rigorous curriculum, it should count in how we evaluate the schools. Going back to the language proficiency, when students leave academically proficient in English and Spanish, it should count. CTE certificates should count. Certification in a programming language. There's a high school in Phoenix that wants to open up and have students finish with a coding language. That should count. AP credits, scholarship dollars, service learning hours. All of those are components of a quality education, and they're being ignored by the state right now, and they're going to count in how we measure schools and teachers going forward. So that's absolutely going to happen. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to get very serious about school finance in this state, folks. We are that level. Yesterday, worked with a colleague of mine who does national standards, and he did school finance. He came in and basically said, look, you can move things around all you want to in Arizona, but your problem is you're just that low. And he said something that stuck with me yesterday that I didn't really say, look, at one time, you were basically like the rest of the South. And remember we used to say this. We used to say, at least we're not the South. At least we're not Georgia or Alabama or Arkansas, etc.
That was the old days.
Here's what he said, and this is really important. He said, it's just you and Mississippi now. Honestly, Georgia has a Hope Scholarship that has been very, very productive. Arkansas and Alabama have both been doing great things in public education. It's us in Mississippi now, folks. And that stung when he mentioned that to me the other day. So we got to do 2 things in finance. Number 1, we need to restore levels of funding in this state. The public has already voted that they mean inflation increases, and I think it's just a travesty that the school system has to sue their own legislature to get it. We need an advocate at the state level who's going to go fight for those things. We have not had somebody in this position for the last 20 years who is actually in for public education, and that's what I'm going to go down there and do. The second thing we need to do is look very, very seriously at new funding sources coming into the state. But we can't do it based off of standardized tests. All of those real-world outcomes that I mentioned, which, by the way, are going to make exciting schools, but they're also going to help us economically, are all going to require new investments in the state. And that's the kind of thing we need to do if we're going to get the public to jump back on board with public education. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Please. Randy.
Is there a state that already has a model like you're proposing, using these multifaceted objective measures that come together for some sort of
good question.
Composite?
No, there isn't. There isn't a state. Largely because at the federal level, and this will, I'll answer the Common Core question right now, by the way, because it's related to Common Core. So, but prior to No Child Left Behind, you should know I created Arizona's first accountability system. And the one I created had no test scores in it. This was 1999. It had no test scores in it. I couldn't get it through the legislature, and I couldn't get it through the education community at the time. It had the things I'm talking about now, college readiness, etc. Then No Child Left Behind happened, and every state had to create an accountability system based on test scores. So the answer to the Common Core question for everybody is really this. I'm in favor of the standards. We need a high quality assessment of those standards, or else teaching and learning is going to basically level out to the level of the assessment. Here's the third piece, and here's where I'm very, very different from every other candidate. Arizona needs to be in control of how we hold schools, educators, and students accountable to the test. That's the difference. And in Arizona, we're going to go down to the federal government and say, look, we're still going to take the test. It's still going to count in our accountability system, but we do not want it to be 96% of how we hold our schools accountable. That's the difference that we're going to go down and do this. So, in favor of the standards. You can go out and tell people, I am in favor of Common Core, but the battle, folks, is going to be on the accountability side. See, states don't get into trouble for giving tests. And in fact, let me give you my class example. If we had a class here, and I had a standard, learn algebra or geometry, and I gave you a test, but there was no grade, would anybody study for it?
No.
You can be honest, you're not going to study for it. But if I told you that it was the entire grade, you would work really hard. So it's the accountability, the consequences to the test that generate how much pressure and how much attention it gets. In that accountability side, we're going to de-emphasize some of that pressure on standardized testing and replace it with things that I know matter when students leave high schools.
I was up at the Morning Scoop held by Arizona Capital Times a few weeks ago, and Superintendent Huppenthal said that our ELL program was spectacular. Could you speak to the state's ELL program and whether or not that is an accurate statement?
Sure. What's the purpose of the ELL program?
Basically to help facilitate English as a second language for our Spanish.
And how much academics are in that program right now?
Zero.
Zero. Zero. So what we do with students right now is we take and we teach them English. And by the way, their peers are learning math.
Right.
And they're learning social studies. And they're learning science. See, to me, here's how I would measure our ELL programs. Not when they leave. I want to know what they're doing a year or two later. I want to know if they are up at the speed academically with their peers later. Because the problem is, what we're doing is we're 4 hours, folks. 4 hours we sit and teach students English. We don't teach them math, we don't teach them anything else but English. And what happens is, yeah, they get reclassified at pretty high rates and they're behind academically, right? The approach I want to take is in learning language, we also need to be learning content. In learning language, we also want our students to be able to express themselves and communicate in the content as well. So with a narrow, rather impoverished view of what it means to learn another language, I think we are doing pretty well. But that's not how I see it. And we know that our students, even when they leave, are not up to speed with their peers academically. Right? So yeah, my goal is not just to reclassify them on a test, which by the way we change. How often do we change that test? A lot. It's for our students to be academically proficient in Spanish. That's the goal. And English, by the way. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to understand what you did. Was it based on a meta-analysis of all these different factors? Is that
Whoa, whoa, whoa. This has got a statistician in the room here. Meta-analysis. That's wonderful. Go ahead.
So it seems that would be an approach to take up, and
Yeah.
that's when you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's exactly what I did. It's just taking the meta-analysis, looking across studies for this, absolutely. Yeah. Look, what I've been trained in is taking research and turning it into real-world policy. That's what I do. And at the University of Chicago, truth is, I got to tell you again, I'm a first-generation college student. I remember when I sat down and started to learn this, my first thought was, who in the heck is going to employ me with this? It just seemed really esoteric, and I learned later how important that skill is. So everything I'm mentioning today is measurable. Everything I'm mentioning today is going to be able to be communicated to the public. If not, it does become esoteric. But it will be things that we can communicate directly to the public. Absolutely. Yes, in the back.
So you're my hero, first of all. So when I ask you a question, it's only because I need to understand, just because I have to understand. How are you going to teach a kid who's coming in with a different Spanish?
Uh-huh.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to make them understand social studies at the same time? Are we going to have Spanish-speaking teachers, or?
Sure.
Yeah? Yeah?
Well, look, let's do this. I'll give you one really easy example. In these classes, students are reading something, right? Why not social studies? They're reading something.
I got you.
You have to read something to learn another language.
Right.
The one very simple thing you can do is what they're reading can be more academic than just language. How many of you have taken a foreign language?
Right.
What you learn is conversational. What you learn is, from a content perspective, what you learn is actually, rather pretty trivial.
Well, it doesn't mean anything.
Right, exactly.
You have
So,
a point.
which is the
That's
reason
your
why I'm going to
bathroom.
just venture to say this. I want to say most of you took Spanish.
Yeah.
Is that right? And most of you can probably order a beer and find the bathroom right here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Important thing.
And so one very, very simple change that you can make is, if the students have to read something in English, learn English, make it an academic content instead of just what time is it, or finding the bathroom. Maybe you're not going to teach a kid to order a beer, but you know what I'm talking about. That is a very simple change. The other thing you can do is, right now, look, when students learn English, they're also learning another language. And one of the things I want to see be more overt is understanding the structure of that language. In other words, indirect objects and direct objects, they're the exact same thing in English and Spanish. And rather than just saying, here, learn English so that you can get through, you can understand what a direct object is, what an indirect object is in any language. What I learned from students in Europe was one of the reasons why they could learn languages so well was because they understood how to learn languages, not just their language. And so my wife was an attorney, and she flippantly said, I could teach English here. And then we went into a Spanish grammar class, and she realized, I don't know grammar. I know how to use English, but I don't know how to structurally break down English. And so what happened was, the students from other countries, they understood grammar in ways that we didn't, right? And that's a great opportunity for our students that we're not taking right now. We just want them to learn English well enough to go out and communicate, and that's really about it. So, one more question. Nugo's going to cut me out. Yes?
I'm sure you know, but your audience probably doesn't know, that 4 years of intensive English instruction is really a fraud, or 4 hours a day. Because at the same time that Arizona did that, they came up with another endorsement that you get, and all teachers are required to get it, by spending 45 to 90 hours of workshop time, and you get an endorsement that allows you to teach kids English. No other requirement.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our kids who are supposed to be getting 4 hours of intensive English instruction, they are not. So, because they've got these teachers that really don't know how to teach English.
So the question we're going to bring up with Upenthal, and I have one of my students right now working on this, is how... Yes, in Sunnyside, I want to know how students are doing academically after they leave. That's a question we're not asking right now. And it's a really important question. Right? The other thing on this last piece here, just to give you some perspective. Folks, we have been segregating our Latino students in Arizona for this exact reason for over 100 years. You go back and look at policies from the turn of the century, and it's the exact same rationale. We need to segregate Mexican students so that they can learn language for their own good. It's literally the same thing. The lack of progress and innovation and sort of visionary thinking on this astounds me, because it has been that same argument, and I'm not exaggerating, for 100 years in this state. There are more creative, more visionary ways to do this, and we're going to take them on.
Yay.
Thank you.